In Assassin's Creed, we play as some of the wisest protagonists, often believing they're always making the right choices. But the reality isn't always what we think. At the end of the day, they're human, and humans make mistakes. Throughout their journeys, each of them has done something that made us pause and say a big WTF. So in this video, we're going to talk about exactly the biggest WTF moments, or in other words, the dumbest decisions made by every Assassin's Creed protagonist. But that's for the assassins only. My biggest WTF moment is finally waiting to play an Assassin's Creed game I've been waiting for and then seeing the prize. Because sometimes, those prizes are sky high. But luckily for you and me, there's a solution. Because this video is sponsored by Aniba. Aniba is a marketplace where you can buy digital game keys for almost any game across PlayStation, Xbox, and PC, often at discounted prices, even around launch. And the best part, the delivery is instant, so once you grab a key, you can jump straight into the game without waiting around. So, if you're interested, make sure to look at those links in the description and the about section so you don't miss out. Alright, now let's get back to those decisions. When people talk about the greatest assassins in the entire franchise, Altair is almost always part of that conversation, and for a good reason. He's disciplined, incredibly skilled, and by the end of his life, he completely transforms the Assassin Brotherhood. The wisdom he gained over the years turned him into one of the most respected mentors in Assassin history. But ironically, the dumbest decision of his life happens right at the very beginning of his story. During the mission at Solomon's Temple to retrieve the Piece of Eden, Altair lets his arrogance completely take control. At that point, he was already considered the Brotherhood's best assassin, and he knew it. The problem was, he started believing the rules didn't apply to him anymore, and that overconfidence led to a complete disaster. As a result, he violated the three most important tenets of the creed. First, he stabbed a man who turned out to be completely innocent, something that an assassin of his rank should never do. Then he made things even worse. Instead of staying hidden and completing the mission quietly, he openly confronted Robert de Sable, which is basically the exact opposite of how an assassin is supposed to operate. And because of that, the Templars immediately realized what was happening. What followed was a brutal counterattack that forced the assassins to retreat back to Masyaf. But the worst part wasn't that he just failed the mission, it was the consequences for the people around him. Altair's reckless actions resulted in the death of one assassin during the escape, and his partner Malik also lost his arm trying to recover the apple after Altair abandoned the situation. So yeah, for someone who would eventually become one of the wisest assassins to ever live, this was a pretty terrible start. But at the same time, that failure is exactly what forced him to grow, and ultimately became the legend we remember today. Ezio is easily one of the most beloved characters in the entire franchise. We followed him from a reckless young noble in Florence to one of the wisest and most experienced mentors the Brotherhood has ever had. But even someone as experienced as Ezio can make a mistake. And one of his biggest ones happens to be in Assassin's Creed Revelations. While searching for the Masyaf keys in Constantinople, Ezio starts investigating Tariq Barleti, the captain of the Janissary. From what he observes, Tariq appears to be secretly meeting with the Byzantine Templars. That obviously raises a lot of suspicion, and after discussing the situation with Prince Suleiman, Ezio becomes convinced that Tariq is the traitor working with the enemy. But here's the problem, he wasn't a traitor at all. In reality, he was secretly pretending to cooperate with the Byzantines so he could lure them into a trap and eliminate them when they felt completely safe. So the man Ezio killed was actually an ally. And what makes this moment even more ironic is something Ezio himself says earlier in the game. At one point, he warns an apprentice about the dangers of jumping to conclusions and killing the wrong target. Yet here, he ends up doing exactly that. If Ezio had taken more time to investigate or confront Tariq, the assassins could have gained a powerful ally in the Janissaries. Instead, they lost him. And while Tariq does reveal the truth before dying and even gives Ezio information about the Byzantine Templars, the damage had already been done. Which makes this one of the rare moments where even Ezio's judgment failed him. Connor is one of the most stoic and focused protagonists in the series. He's the kind of assassin who puts the creed above everything else, and that focus is exactly what makes him so compelling. But even he isn't immune to making a heartbreaking mistake. Late in Assassin's Creed 3, Connor is forced into a situation that no assassin should ever want to face. His childhood best friend has been manipulated by Charles Lee into believing that Connor betrayed their people. And because of that deception, Connor ends up killing him. Now here's why fans call this a dumb decision. Connor is a master of non-lethal combat and disarming techniques. Technically, he didn't have to kill his friend. There were other ways to stop him without taking his life. But instead, the act goes through and the consequences hit hard. Not only does it leave Connor emotionally scarred, but it also isolates him from his own tribe. After the war, he no longer has a place to call home and his reputation as an outsider is cemented. So yeah, even the most disciplined assassin can make a choice that haunts him forever. and in Connor's case, it's the loss of his best friend that lingers the most. Edward Kenway is easily one of the most entertaining and reckless protagonists in the entire Assassin's Creed franchise. He's charming, brash, and completely unapologetic about doing whatever he wants. That audacity is exactly what makes him so fun to play, but it also leads to some of his dumbest decisions. And that very first happens right at the start of Assassin's Creed 4. In the opening hours of the game, Edward kills the traitor Duncan Walpole. He steals his assassin robes and sails off to Havana to collect a reward from the Templars. And then he literally hands the Templars a map showing the location of every assassin bureau in the Caribbean, all for some quick cash. It's impulsive, greedy, and it's exactly the kind of choice that screams disaster. And of course, disaster is exactly what happens. That single act gives the Templars a massive head start, directly leading to the deaths of countless assassins. From that moment on, Edward spends nearly the entire game trying to fix the chaos he created. What makes this moment even more interesting is how it shapes his character arc. Edward starts as a self-centered pirate focused on money and fame, but as the game progresses, he begins to understand the real cost of his choices, losing friends, endangering the Brotherhood, and seeing firsthand the consequence of his greed. So while Edward remains one of the coolest, most skilled, and most entertaining protagonists in the series, this moment perfectly highlights how his impulsiveness and thirst for quick rewards can backfire spectacularly. Shay Cormac is one of the most unique protagonists in the series. Unlike the others, his story flips the usual assassin versus Templar dynamic on its head. He starts as a loyal assassin, but after witnessing the Brotherhood's recklessness, he defects to the Templars. And for a while, he's terrifyingly efficient at dismantling the assassins in the colonies. But here's the kicker. Even in his crusade, Shay makes a surprisingly dumb meta decision. While he and the Templars wreak havoc on the Brotherhood, they deliberately leave enough remnants alive like a crippled Achilles. The idea was to use them as a warning, a living example of what happens when you defy the Templars. Sounds clever, right? Except it backfires in the long run. By sparing Achilles, Shay unknowingly sets the stage for the very thing he tried to prevent. Achilles survives, recovers, and eventually trains Connor, who systematically dismantles every Templar Shay had worked so hard to put in power. So yeah, even the most calculated and ruthless assassin turned Templar can make a decision that ends up completely undermining everything they've done. Shay's mercy as a warning might have seemed smart at the time, but in hindsight, it's one of the most ironic missteps in the series. Arno's story in Assassin's Creed Unity is one of tragedy, ambition, and, well, a fair share of questionable decisions. He is skilled, loyal to the Creed, and driven by a desire to set things right, but sometimes his emotions get the better of him. And that leads us to arguably his dumbest moment, the climax of the game. During the final confrontation with the Grandmaster Germain, Arno and Elise face off against a man wielding a Sword of Eden, a powerful precursor artifact capable of untold destruction. Now here's where things go sideways. Despite knowing just how dangerous a precursor artifact is, Arno ends up trapped under rubble during the fight. Instead of waiting for him or coordinating a safer approach, Elise charges Germain alone, driven by vengeance. Arno's mistake isn't as obvious at first, as he simply fails to convince Elise to prioritize their safety over her need for revenge. A subtle misstep, but with catastrophic consequences. The result, Elise is killed by the artifact's energy, and Arno is left completely alone. No brotherhood, no father figure, no lover. Everything he fought for comes crashing down, all because a series of impulsive choices overpower logic and strategy. It's a brutal reminder that in Assassin's Creed, even the smartest, most skilled protagonists can falter when emotion clouds judgment. Now let's talk about Jacob and Evie Frye. These two bring something completely different to the Assassin's Creed franchise, but that doesn't mean they're perfect. They're far from it. Starting with Jacob, his dumbest moments are honestly a recurring theme throughout Assassin's Creed Syndicate. He's brash, impulsive, and loves to charge headfirst into danger, sometimes without thinking about the fallout. He assassinates Philip Twopenny, the governor of the Bank of England, and James Broodnell, a high-ranking politician, all in an attempt to weaken Templar control. On paper, it sounds like a smart move, but in practice, it's absolute chaos. His actions indirectly cause a total collapse of the British economy. Inflation skyrockets, currency devalues, and London's transportation and medical systems spiral into dysfunction. Basically, Jacob spends half the game cleaning up the mess he made in the first half of his reforms. And Evie literally has to follow him around fixing everything just to keep the city from falling apart. And speaking of Evie, her dumbest decision is almost the exact opposite of her brother. Too much focus and not enough flexibility. She spends nearly the entire game obsessing over the Shroud of Eden, completely ignoring the growing Templar threat and the chaos Jacob creates with the Rooks. Because of her rigidity and refusal to compromise, the Templar Grandmaster Crawford Starrick is able to maintain his stranglehold on London far longer than he should have. Her single-minded pursuit of precursor lore nearly causes a massive rift between the twins and puts the Brotherhood in serious jeopardy. So yeah, Jacob breaks everything, Evie obsesses over the Shroud, and together they somehow manage to both save and nearly destroy London at the same time. It's chaotic, it's ridiculous, and honestly, it's why they're one of the most entertaining sibling duos in the series. Bayek's story in Assassin's Creed Origins is heartbreaking from start to finish, and it all begins with one tragic mistake. This kind of moment doesn't just change the game, it changes him forever. At the start of the game, Bayek is confronted by masked men who are after his son Khemu and want Bayek to open the vault. In a desperate attempt to protect him, Bayek makes a decision that seems instinctively right, but ends up being catastrophic. Instead of finding a more tactical way out, he brings Khemu to help him. A struggle ensues, and in the chaos, Bayek's own hand is forced. He accidentally stabs his son. One split decision born from fear and desperation destroys everything he loves. His family is shattered, and Bayek is launched on a decade-long quest for revenge. It's a gut-wrenching moment, and it's the ultimate example of how even the most skilled and honorable assassin can make a single choice with devastating consequences. From that point on, Bayek's entire life is defined by that tragic, dumb decision. Kassandra is one of the most powerful and feared warriors in all of ancient Greece. She can take down entire camps, outsmart generals, and survive situations that would kill almost anyone. But even a legendary Misthios isn't immune to making mistakes. One of the most talked about dumb choices in Assassin's Creed Odyssey comes during a mission involving a cultist. Kassandra is faced with a gut-wrenching or hard decision: chase down a dangerous cultist or save a child who's in immediate danger. It's the kind of moment that feels impossible. If she goes after the cultist, the child is left in harm's way. If she saves the child, the cultist escapes to cause more chaos later. Many players side letting the cultist go as the wrong choice, and it's easy to see why. In that instant, it feels like failure, like you made the wrong call. But what makes it human is that Kassandra doesn't have super foresight. She cannot know exactly how the decision will ripple through the story. She's making the best choice she can in a split second. That's why this dumb moment stands out. It's a dumb decision only in hindsight, but in the moment it's a perfectly human one. It reminds us that even the strongest, smartest, and most unstoppable characters have to make impossible choices, and sometimes doing the right thing in one sense means failing in another. It's messy, emotional, and heartbreaking, and it's one of the reasons why Kassandra feels so real. Eivor is the kind of protagonist who thrives on choices. Brutal, bold, and sometimes borderline reckless. But the most fearless Viking has some moments that make you cringe. One of the more infamous dumb decisions in Assassin's Creed Valhalla happens in Xenophonshire. During a heated argument about the Isu artifacts and Sigurd's supposed godhood, in the middle of the chaos, Eivor is given the option to punch either Basim or Sigurd. On paper, it's venting frustration on two people who've been manipulating events for years. In practice, it's a tactical nightmare. Punching your only two allies in a foreign land while surrounded by enemies is about as foolish as it gets. But the consequences goes far beyond a bruised ego. This Sigurd strike pushes Sigurd further away emotionally and mentally, making him more vulnerable to Basim's manipulation. So yeah, it feels good at the moment, but strategically it's a disaster. Eivor might be a Viking warrior, but even she learns the hard way that letting emotion take over can have devastating consequences. And as a result, you get the bad ending. Basim's story in Assassin's Creed Valhalla is long, intricate, and filled with obsession. He spends years hunting for the reincarnation of Odin, driven by revenge for the Isu-era imprisonment of his son, Fenrir. And while his skills, cunningness, and patience are unmatched, he makes one of the series' most ironic mistakes. The dumb part? Basim incorrectly identifies Sigurd as Odin when in reality Sigurd is the reincarnation of Tyr. Even worse, he completely dismisses Eivor simply because she's a woman. But the true oversight is even more glaring. Eivor bears the mark of the sage on her neck, a clear sign of reincarnation, but a childhood scar from a wolf attack practically hides it. Basim never notices it. As a result, his real enemy grows in power right under his nose for years, while he wastes his energy chasing the wrong target. It's a classic example of obsession blinding judgment. Basim is brilliant, deadly, and relentless, but even he proves that pride, assumptions, and overlooking the obvious can turn a master into an apprentice. And this thing leads to his capture at the end of the game. Naoe is a skilled and determined warrior, but even the sharpest fighters have moments where judgment falters. One of her most talked about missteps comes during the Shinbaku questline with the Mourner choice. She has the option to attack a target known as the Mourner, and instead of taking a cautious approach, she goes in aggressively. The problem? She misses her intended target and accidentally impales an innocent bodyguard. The fallout is immediate. Even though this choice is mostly player related and it depends on how you choose, it's still a mistake. Yasuke, who favors a more measured approach, becomes furious and the tension between the two escalates. It's a stark reminder that even the most skilled assassin can let recklessness overshadow precision. Then speaking of Yasuke, he carries the weight of a much larger mistake. During the Second Iga War, while serving Oda Nobunaga, he follows orders that lead to the destruction of Iga Province's homeland. Though he was technically obeying commands, the result is devastating. Thousands of innocent people die, homes are destroyed, and the moral cost is immense. This act becomes Yasuke's most insignificant moral failure as he spends much of the game trying to make amends. And because of that, he works with the Kakushiba Ikki, trying to protect what's left and atone for the tragedy he was a part of. So in both of their stories, you see two sides of dumb decisions, one born of impulsiveness and the other of blind obedience, and both with consequences that shape the rest of their journeys. And that's it for today's video. If you find this video interesting, make sure to give it a big thumbs up, and if you have any questions, then also let us know in the comment section below. And with that being said, we'll see you in the next one. Till then, take care and goodbye.